How's it, guys? Welcome to another video of Asian Man Struggles. I know it's been a while since I last made my video, but today's topic is pretty dear to my heart. As many of you might know, I'm actually from Hawaii. I'm an Asian who's from Hawaii. And today's topic has to deal with Asians who grew up in Hawaii, are born in Hawaii, or born from another country or lived in Hawaii, versus Asians that are born and grew up in the mainland. Okay, and when I mean the mainland, I mean the Continental US. I had to explain that because in my experience, people that I meet in the mainland, whether I visited there or when I lived there, are taken back by that word mainland. They're just so used to living in the US that they never thought of themselves as the mainland. But here in Hawaii, we refer to people who live in the continental US as, mainland people, okay? So that's just a little disclaimer right there. But yes, differences and similarities. Believe it or not, Asians are quite different, okay? We already know that in Asia. It's very diverse. And even Asian Americans in the US are pretty diverse too. It differs from state to state, okay? Everyone has their differences, but this is just my experience. My experience interacting with Asians from the mainland in Hawaii, and also living in the mainland and meeting mainland Asians. So here is my little spiel on explaining the differences and similarities. So some of you who are watching this know a little bit about Hawaii. You see the posters like this one here. The typical lei, grass shacks, surfing, palm trees, Hawaiian people. But a lot of people don't know that Hawaii is very diverse. We have a lot of different groups, and the majority of the groups in Hawaii are Asian. In fact, I think we're like 40 to 60% Asian, give or take. And some percentage of that are mixed Asian. So they're a mix of different things. Some of you probably have heard of the word hapa. It's actually a Hawaiian word. It means half. Okay, and it's usually referred to people who are half Asian or half white or half something else, right? And yes, Hawaii is pretty diverse, and there's a lot of Asians here, and so it really shows to you that Hawaii has been influenced by Asian culture a lot. But how does that differ to Asians that live in the mainland? Now, before I touched up on the differences, I want to go over the similarities first, because there's not really that much, okay? Differences I feel are a lot more between the two. So the number one thing is education is important to both Hawaii Asians and mainland Asians, from what I experience. In Hawaii, we usually emphasize that kids, Asian kids, a lot of them try to do their best in school, get good grades, go to college. But because Hawaii is so small and so limited, we're limited to not that many schools to choose from, and many just end up going to University of Hawaii, okay? Whereas Asians in mainland, you hear different stories. They go to different universities, and it's very diverse, from UC Irvine or to Yale to Seattle University, all these different universities. In Hawaii, not as much. If you have the privilege of going to a school in the mainland, it's pretty good. It says a lot about you. But more often, many local Asian kids go to University of Hawaii because we're so limited. But education is important. And then the second thing is, yes, like other Asians, we love our Asian food here. A lot of us are foodies. We love taking pictures of food, okay, especially Asian food. But I would say Hawaii Asians do have a more preference for more local Asian food, so more like a fusion of the foods that you see here. Okay, we have a lot of that in Hawaii, and add Hawaiian food to that too. We're famous for our plate lunches, which is basically a scoop of rice with some kind of meat and some kind of dish from an Asian cuisine. Usually, it could be random too. It could be like fried chicken, whatever. But yes, Okay, and then I would say another thing I recognize similar is respecting elders. We really care about our elders here, people who are, are older than us. We tend to respect them a little bit more. Some of us, are really formal. We call them uncle or auntie, out of respect. And it's a prevalent thing here. It's pretty common for you to hear a random stranger calling someone who's older than them auntie or uncle. Okay. The mainland, not so much, but they do respect their elders. I've seen it. But here we have a more closer relationship with older people who we're not related to as well. And yes, and like I mentioned before, Hawaii is pretty diverse. Not only do we have Asian groups, we have a lot of different other Pacific groups too. Some European as well. Portuguese used to be a big group here. We have a lot of Portuguese food that mix in with our local culture. And yes, we totally respect diversity. I've seen it in the mainland too, especially nowadays. Diversity. A lot of people try different types of food, different cultural events. But yeah. And then, other than that, we both look Asian. Okay, mainland Asian and Hawaii Asians. It's pretty common for us to be recognized as an Asian person, anywhere in the world. And so that thing I would say that we're pretty similar. All right, now onward to the differences. Okay, so with differences, I'm gonna break it down. So the first thing I'm gonna talk about is how we see identity. This is something I really recognized when I went to the mainland. When I grew up in Hawaii, I never realized this until I met some mainland Asians and other mainland people. Here in Hawaii, we see ourselves as local people first. So whether you're born here, whether you've lived here for a while, versus someone who's a foreigner, who's from the mainland, okay? And that's how we see ourselves. Like, they usually ask you, where are you from, or where you live, That's it's kind of like a local thing that we say, and try to understand where we each live and are from. And usually after that, we would ask, what high school did you go to? Okay, that kind of gets you an idea. We're trying to investigate if we know so and so. So it's a pretty close knit culture in Hawaii. So being local is a very important identity, I would say. And the second thing would be ethnic group. Okay, and it's kind of hard to not tell. I mean, hard to pass up your ethnic group, because your last name kind of gives it away. Usually we realize it by your last names of what you are, and we usually identify ourselves as that. Like, for me, Chinese, or my friend who's Japanese, okay. And then after that, we see ourselves as an American, because we are the 50th state. Okay, and then interesting enough, we see ourselves Asian last. I mean, other people can debate about this with me, other local people, other mainland Asians, but I've realized that, and I have a story to tell, okay? But before I get to that story, let's talk about mainland Asians. Mainland Asians, from my experience, they see their ethnic group first, okay? So if you're a Chinese person in New York, okay, you see yourself as Chinese because you were raised Chinese. And then next, you see yourself as an American because, New York is part of America. Okay, and then if you're, and then after that, you see yourself as an Asian American, which is something that's kind of missing in Hawaii's culture. It's not really a thing, really. Asian American, you see yourself as American and Asian as two separate things. But in the mainland, I've seen like this Pan-Asian cultural identity that has been built up, and a lot of mainland Asians see themselves as that. Hawaii, we're still behind, and I don't really hear that from a lot of people. No, not that many people say they're Asian American in Hawaii. It's a funny thing. And then after that, they see themselves as a resident of that city or that state. Okay, it's probably a little different from New York City people. New York City it's a world within a world, I would like to say, from my experience. But other than that, just meeting other mainland Asians, I see this order most often. Okay, and then now let's talk about my story, my experience. So I did the same thing, scenario both in Hawaii and in the mainland. So when I was in the mainland, I was talking to two people of Asian descent. When I was trying to talk to this Asian girl in the mainland, and she mentioned to me, you look familiar, and I made a joke. Oh, I look like a lot of people. It's probably because I'm Asian. And then she laughed at that, okay, because she related to it, and she laughed about, because we're both Asian, But when I did the same thing when I went back home to Hawaii, it was kind of different. So same incident happened to me, okay. I was talking to another Asian girl in Hawaii who's from Hawaii, and she said, I've seen you before. Do you come here often? And I was like, well, you probably have, because I look like most people here, because I'm Asian. And then she just looked at me with a weird look. Like, I was like, huh. It's like she didn't really care. But then after that, the conversation just died. Well, one may say maybe one was interested in me, one was not, okay? But I realized that, the identity of Asian American, it's not really a big thing in Hawaii. So this is the order we see ourselves in, okay? Next, I'm going to touch up on the cultural mindset of Hawaii Asians versus mainland Asians. Now, in Hawaii, many of the Asians here have a more collective sort of mindset. And if you don't know what I mean by that, is the group matters more, okay? We think in terms of the group more often than the individual. Of course, it's different amongst different people, okay? But I feel like group mentality is more prevalent. I mean, for example, I have another story. There's this Filipino girl who was in my community college class back years ago, and this is still in Hawaii. And she's originally from California, but she looks really Filipino, and she passed for a local person. If many of you don't know, in Hawaii, there's a lot of Filipino is a big Asian group here, all right, next to Japanese, Chinese, and Koreans. But anyways, so she relayed to me that it's really hard making friends here. And I was like, why is that? I mean, you look like everyone else. But she told me, no, it's actually different, because if you don't know so-and-so, if you don't know someone who knows that person, they don't really relate to you as much. They don't really want to make friends with you. And I was like, really? Is it? Yeah. I mean, she's like, I try asking people out to, hang out or just join something. And it's really hard to do that. People don't really take initiative. And I was like, really? How is that different from California? And she told me it's a lot different, because in California, everyone's out there to make friends. And I was like, oh, okay. And that made me think. The group mentality is really strong in Hawaii, because where you came from, and what high school you came from, where you lived in Hawaii made a whole difference in who you hanged out with. And those friends will introduce you to other friends, okay? And because of that, you kind of relate to that group a lot. And there's a whole thing about it, I would say, okay? But okay, let's move on to the next thing. The next one is a big one. We're more relaxed about race and culture. I've seen this, a different side of the coin when I was in the mainland, okay? In the mainland, people are a lot more sensitive about race and culture, I would say. If I try to make like a race joke, they'll think I'm racist or something. And you'll be surprised. In Hawaii, we like to make fun of other groups. It's not because we have any prejudice against the other group. It's just we like to poke fun, okay? There's a lot of different jokes on different ethnicities, and I would say Portuguese is one of them. But nowadays we live in such a PC culture. It's changing. I would say it's definitely changing. But in Hawaii, we're pretty relaxed about race and culture. And maybe that roots from, our diverse environment where we all live in a tiny island. We all have to just learn to make do with what we got. And, I would say racism in Hawaii, it still exists, per se, but it's different from the mainland. Here, racism is more internal. You don't really see it a lot, between different groups. No one will call you out on it, oh, you chink, whatever and stuff. You don't really hear that a lot. Sometimes it does come up, but it's rare. It's really rare. People still, do business. We don't really care. People intermingle, intermarriage. It's not a frowned upon thing in Hawaii. Okay, but it might be a little bit different with Caucasian white people. And there's a whole thing about that. I can make a whole video about how local people see haoles. And if you don't know, haole means like white people here. It actually means foreigner, but it's usually referred to white people. But anyways, I also think it has to do with us being very politically uninterested. We're pretty politically neutral, even though we're a blue state. I would say we're not really progressive. We don't really care about politics that much, other than that it's democracy, and that's about it. We don't really care. We care more about trying to make a living, I would say. And the last thing about Hawaii Asians are that, we're really considerate and trusting of other people. I would say it's part of our aloha culture. People come and visit. We usually give them our bed or house to stay. We try to treat them, make them feel comfortable. And you can say, oh, that's the same for other people in the mainland. But I would say it's a lot more here in Hawaii, especially with strangers, I would say. Where we treat our strangers pretty well. And even if we don't know you that well, we try our best to be considerate, even if I'm applying for a job and I don't know what direction I'm going. I feel like a lot of Hawaii people, a lot of Asians in Hawaii would help you versus in the mainland. It could be different depending what city, you live or from, okay? Okay, and this is my experience with the cultural mindset of mainland Asians. And most of them that I met, they're pretty career driven. They're pretty ambitious. Not to say that a lot of Hawaii Asians aren't. I would say there are a lot more mainland Asians. And the reason is because they've had a lot more opportunities. They've seen the world. They've been to different states. They've tried different things in the mainland. You could do a lot more stuff. Better schools. Maybe that's why. Maybe they're more driven because they're constantly competing with more people. But I've definitely realized that and seen that more with Asians in the mainland. And it could be because the environment that they live in the mainland, it's a lot more more competitive versus Hawaii, who's more there to just chill. It has that island vibe. So I can see why Asians in the mainland are a lot more ambitious. They're also a lot more independent, a lot more individualistic. Much like white people, they're very independent, very individualistic. They're all about doing it for yourself, doing things for yourself, who you are as an individual. It really matters a lot more with Asians in the mainland, I've seen. Maybe it's influenced by white people. I don't know. Okay. And they're a lot more liberal-minded. A lot more progressive with the status quo. Like the recent events with George Floyd and everything. I feel like that could never really happen in Hawaii. The movement like that. But don't get me wrong. We did have our fair share of protests here too because of that. But I don't think we would initiate it. Because of that. We just followed along. Hawaii, I feel like a lot of people in Hawaii are just more followers, if anything. But yeah, so Asians in the mainland are a lot more liberal-minded. They're more into this stuff that are going on in the United States. The social changes, and they're a lot more. Like I said before, with Hawaii Asians, that Asians in the mainland are a lot more sensitive about race and culture, and I can totally see that. They dealt with racism quite physically a lot more, I would say. And they're also quite self-assertive, more competitive. And I would say they're self-assertive in a way where you can see it. You can definitely see this person is very ambitious and he knows what he wants and he focuses on that. Where in Hawaii, we're pretty chill about things. We're not really self-assertive. Don't get us wrong, we're not weak or anything, but we kind of prioritize the group more. The people in your group. We don't really care about our needs as much, although that's different with different people. But I've seen that Asians in the mainland would be more assertive of getting what they want. Okay? All right, so with that, there's some other differences that are worth mentioning. Here in Hawaii, English is more simply expressed. What I've noticed in the mainland is a lot of Asian mainlanders, they when they talk, it's longer sentences. It's always longer sentences. They use bigger words, okay, most of the time. Not every person. Okay, just like in Asians in Hawaii, some are pretty quite eloquent when they talk, but I would say people in Hawaii, we talk really simple, you know. And some of you may not know, we have our own local accent. We even have a dialect called Pidgin, and it's basically English, but very to the point. Okay, there's not much to express other than then a simple phrase expresses everything. And then, old friends and family matters a lot more than individual ambition, I would say, with Asians in Hawaii. I mean, mainland Asians, they do care about family, don't get me wrong, but it's mostly what do you want, you know? Family will be behind you, but you got to make it yourself. So like I said before, they're a lot more independent, ambitious because of that. And connections matter a lot more. Like I said, Hawaii is a tiny island. Who you know is really important. Not to say that, connections don't help in the mainland too. But I would say in the mainland, your talents matter a lot more. And it's because you guys have a lot more opportunities, But still, they encourage you to mingle. And like I said about that girl from California who said had a hard time making friends in Hawaii, she's so used to mingling in California. It's just so easy to just talk to a random stranger and make a friend out of it. In Hawaii, it's a lot harder, I would say. It's a lot harder. People are more closed off to their own groups. And also, and just one more major difference is that I've noticed a lot of Asians here care more about sports and Vegas. It might be just part of our local culture. And then, like I said, back in our identity prioritization, I would say Hawaii Asians try to assimilate to local culture more than American culture, okay? And a lot of Asian Americans in the mainland, it's all about being American from your ethnic group, But in Hawaii, it's more about being the local first. And I always also say because Hawaii is pretty boring sometimes after you get past the beach and everything else. People like to just have fun, surf, play some volleyball on the beach, play some sports, go gamble in Vegas, have fun. Not to say Asian mainlands don't do that too. I'm sure they do that too. But I feel like it's just a lot more in Hawaii. So why the differences? Why are Asians in Hawaii so different? I would say because it's about the Hawaiian culture. It's about respecting the Aina, and Aina means land, okay? And it's not only just about the land, it's about, this responsibility, this kuleana in Hawaiian, which that's what it means, responsibility. That, the land, if the land provides a lot for you, so you must respect the land, And because of that, I feel like Hawaii people don't really have this competitive nature. We're all about helping each other, and doing what we can. So a lot of people would say, oh, Hawaii people don't like haoles, they don't like white people, they don't like mainlanders. Well, it's because I would say, this is my theory, is that when they come here to Hawaii, even Asians from the mainland too, it's the same thing. When they come here, they think they own everything, okay? They put their American culture first above everything else. And I feel like that's probably a reason why we're different. Is that when they come to Hawaii, yes, it's vacation, but also they think it's just their backyard, okay? Whereas people in Hawaii, we don't treat it as our backyard. We treat it as like everything. It's in our environment. Hawaii is not only our home, but like in a way, it's like our mother, okay? It's our family. So that's just a philosophy I feel like Hawaii people have, and even Asians in Hawaii have. And we're small, so we learn to share and help each other. We're more worried about surviving because everything is just so damn expensive here. Okay, we're so limited. Opportunities are not much. We do what we can. And also we all know each other. So don't think you're better than anyone. Okay, And that's what usually happens when people from the mainland come, whether they're Asian or not, is like they think they're better. And it's not because they think they're better, it's just they're more self-assertive, they're more ambitious. So it comes off as if they're better than anyone, okay? So I would say that's why we're so different. Asians in Hawaii, we try to assimilate to local culture more than living the American dream, okay? That's probably the major differences. So that's my video, guys. I apologize if it's a little too long. There's just a lot of things to cover. Actually, I can make a whole class on this. There's just a lot to talk about. And, as always, remember to like, comment, subscribe, and also apologize if the quality of the sound isn't that great. The fan next to me is just really hot right now in August in Hawaii. It's just very humid. Okay, we just survived like a hurricane not that long ago. Well, anyways, as always, carry on.